is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Magicians, Season 2, Episode 5, Cheat Day. In this episode, did I say out loud that if Julia wound up pregnant by Renard that I was going to quit the show? Did I say that? Because I'm thinking it. I'm just thinking it. I swear. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First of all, thank you to Nicole for commissioning this episode. Guys, I am, first of all, big shout out to Nicole because she swooped in when I opened up some Saturday slots and immediately was like, I'm getting this and I'm getting this. So I appreciate folks who filled in my Saturdays for me. You're the real heroes. Second of all, I don't want to talk about this at all, but here we are. So, guys, it is well known to those of you who have followed more than one unspoiled property that the magical pregnancy trope is a thing that I hate. I hate it. I hate it so much. Every now and then it can be done well. And even when they're done well, I can't help but side-eye it because it is such a thing. And really part of what makes it grotesque when it's usually the way it's done is the fact that almost in every case, the pregnancy was not consensual. The sex leading to the pregnancy is often not consensual. And sometimes there's not even sex. Sometimes, in the case of certain, for example, I believe in Angel, there's a whole thing. It's just a weird, sexual assault impregnation thing that actually doesn't include actual sex. And this is one of those storylines in this show that I am going to make my displeasure known, but I'm also going to put an asterisk next to it and say I do appreciate the show putting abortion on the table, so to speak, as an option, because it is really not done on a lot of shows that aren't, for example, private series from Netflix or someplace that doesn't really have to worry so much about a network and the way that they are going to feel about putting it out there. And this is a Sci-Fi Channel show, right? So they can kind of do more. And it's one of those things that's so absurd because, you have people getting their hearts literally ripped out, their eyes ripped out, blood everywhere, rape. But if we talk about abortion, it's suddenly this thing. And that's just how it is, unfortunately. There is a standard that doesn't make any sense. It's the same as being we can show somebody getting brutally tortured, but God forbid we show a dick. And I have to appreciate that we've come along as a society to the point where it's not even a question in the scene when Julia figures out that she's pregnant. Katie doesn't even go, well, do you want to do this? Are you sure? Katie is just immediately all right, well, we're going to set up an appointment and we're going to take you. And that's it. There isn't a conversation had about it. It's simply, this is what you're doing. And I also appreciate the fact that Katie has had one and that it wasn't it's not presented as some sort of terrible sin. It's something that she feels a little uncomfortable sharing. And that's different. As somebody, I had an abortion when I was about 22 years old, I think. And it is something that I try and be as open as I can about, because I personally think if you shame people for that, you are human garbage, and you have no right to say a word about it. It's none of your business. And people can come at me saying whatever they want about me, and I will be very secure in the knowledge that they are trash. It does not hurt me for people to make assumptions and judgments about me, because it shows me who they are. And that's how I approach it. And I want other people out there to know that it's not an uncommon thing, that it's not this shameful thing that like a small percentage of the population, it's treated that way by the loudest, terriblest members of society. But it is something that a lot of people, whether they got pregnant before they were ready for children, or they got pregnant and experienced some sort of like medical problem, or any number of variety of reasons, there are so many women who have had them and do not talk about it because they know that they will be on the receiving end of abuse for it. So I really like the fact that the show not only has it as an option, doesn't even like question whether she's going to want one, just as like, of course she does. Are you high? Doesn't try to be like, oh, but this is a baby and what are you doing? It's the fucking demon spawn, like, yeah, she wants it out. And then is like, oh, and also it doesn't have to be demon spawn for this to be a completely valid thing to do. And I think that, there's really something to be said for the fact that the same people who tend to shit on women who get abortions are also the kinds of people who would shit on somebody like Katie for having a child. Really what it is they don't want somebody like Katie having sex. That's really what it is. They think that she should not be having sex. And if she does, she should use 11 types of birth control. And even then she deserves what she gets, in quotes. So, and what's really disturbing about this is, considering where Julia lives, she's very lucky, because there are many states in which she would have to get the permission of the father in order to have the procedure in the first place. And if she did not decide to have an abortion at all and decided to give birth, she would have to share custody of her child with her rapist. And that is a no joke, legit law in several states. Even if the man admitted it was rape, he still gets joint custody of the child, which is a hellscape. Like, this is the fact that that's a thing is it's a sort of archaic isn't even the word, So because of all of that and how controversial the topic of abortion is, that softened the blow of her being pregnant because of them handling it in a matter-of-fact, mature way. But of course, it doesn't go super awesome. So the first thing, I'm just talking about Julia's whole thing right out of the gate, so I hope y'all are ready. Julia, I appreciate so much having Katie, because these two are unlikely allies. And I expected them to eventually have to team up at some point just because they were both outcasts. But I really love that they have set aside anything that happened before and are 100% on the same team now. And that Katie is willing to be there for her through this. And some of that may just be due to guilt because Katie feels bad that she ran away. But honestly, whatever the reasoning, fine. Do whatever, whatever it takes to get you to step up. I don't mind. And she goes into the appointment and she has a really nice meeting with a doctor who is understanding about the fact that she wants this fucking abortion ASAP. The original wait time isn't that long. It's a couple of days if she were to schedule it the normal way. But Julia is very right to be worried about the gestation period of a supernatural being. That's one of those things that I appreciate because I know how often a gestation period is sped up when in these cases of a woman being impregnated against her will, they oftentimes decide to have her be pregnant for a much shorter period of time, because just having her pregnant on the show isn't interesting. The baby is what's interesting. The birth is what's interesting. The probable, like, growing up of said baby faster than average is what's interesting. So, but nevertheless, despite that happening in this trope a lot of the time, the characters, the women, are always surprised. You know, they are always like, oh my God, I'm pregnant. This is horrible. But they also think it's going to be 9 months anyway, and are startled when things accelerate and, you know, don't follow the normal human pregnancy sort of timeline. So I really like the fact that Julia thinks of that and is like, I don't fucking know what this is. I can't treat this like a regular pregnancy. For all I know, by next week, I'll be ready to give birth. And I can't risk waiting several days for this, you know, because what if by the time I get to the abortion appointment, the baby looks like it has developed to a stage that it would make it illegal to abort? I can't risk that. Or I've given birth already, but, you know, even if that's not the case, it could still be she winds up getting turned away. And this woman agrees and really sympathizes with her in making an appointment earlier. But when Julia comes in and talks to the woman at the front desk, that woman cannot find her appointment. And it is a really, like, it's one of those scenes that I think is exceptionally well done, because there's not anything, like, there isn't any reason to suspect something, like, other than as a viewer. But if you were, like, behind them in line, for example, about to also check in, and you watched what was happening here, the receptionist isn't acting in a way that makes it seem as if she is overtaken by something. There's nothing here that's, like, overtly wrong. It's simply that she can't find the appointment and does not want to let Julia in. And of course, again, as a viewer, you're seeing this and you're like, oh shit, what's happening? Now, I have to be honest, it didn't occur to me that the baby was the one doing this. I don't know that it's the baby, but that seems to be what Julia assumes. I thought Reynard was aware that she was pregnant and was controlling things from afar somehow. Or that there was some sort of fail-safe that Reynard had in place for the eventuality that a woman got pregnant at all, not even specifically Julia, that fetus would be protected from this by magics that were, like, in place for any child of his. But what it seems like Julia believes is going on is that the fetus is protecting itself using magic, which is so horrifying. Like, it's bad enough for Reynard to continue controlling her and having dominion over her body against her will after all of this. But knowing that there is a creature, it's not even like a passive, innocent creature inside of her that it just happens to be unwanted. This is a creature full of malice that's inside of her, with awareness and ability to affect the world around it. And that is horrible. Like, that makes the pregnancy even worse than it already was. And she goes into this appointment finally after this woman is sort of like bullied into talking to the doctor and double checking that she has this appointment. And she is noticing the doctor acting strangely. She keeps on, like, trying to pick up this, I think it's like a hypodermic needle, and then dropping it and doing it again. And it's almost like her muscles are just contracting and causing her to drop this thing. And like she's woozy. And she tries to push past this and continue on with the procedure. And then we get one of the most awful slow motion. And I don't mean slow motion like it was actually slow motion. I mean it feels like slow motion because this doctor, this is one of those, it takes the actor to pull this off, right? So the doctor is holding up this instrument. I don't know what you would call it, but I think it's like once the embryo is, or once the woman is anesthetized, is that how you say that word? Anesthetized? I think it is to sort of swish things around so that it's able to be taken out of the uterus a little bit more easily. But it's like forked. It's like this little, almost looks like a skewer with a forked tip. And she's picking it up and holding it up. And her face is unreadable. Like, she does not look afraid. She doesn't look... There's no real expression beyond focus. And Julia is telling her to stop. And I love the fact that she says, I can't. Like, oh, it doesn't have a forked tip. It has sort of a rounded tip like a whisk. So, okay, I think it is what I was saying anyway. And the fact that she is able to reply and say, I can't, but not able to express any fear or anything. She's not able to express, period. It is the worst fucking thing I've ever heard. And Katie hears Julia screaming and gets up and runs to her right past the receptionist, who is sitting stock still, staring unblinking at her computer screen, totally enchanted, like out of the way. And by the time Katie comes into the room, the doctor has jammed this thing into her own eye, through her eye into her skull, clearly. It seems like she is dead. And collapsed on the ground. She is screaming by then. You know, she wasn't able to emote about the situation at large, but she sure as fuck did once it was planted in her fucking eyeball. And Katie, like, the two of her, the actress who plays Julia, I really feel for her in some ways because she has just had to play sad and desperate and tormented for like a straight up fucking, year and a half at this point. And it must get really exhausting. But the look that Julia has on her face here of like, it's a combination of emotions that she's got here. And it's shock, it's exhaustion, it's sadness, and it's also like this like deep fear that she knows this is like going to anybody else for help with this procedure is going to result in this same thing happening. She cannot take care of this the ordinary way. Well, what are her options then? You know, and realizing that when it comes down to it, she is the reason. Now, it's not true, I would like to say, but to her mind, I'm sure she feels she is the reason that this woman died. And it's so, so deeply unfair. And what Julia says to Katie here startled me a little bit. She says, use wards. Do it yourself. The thing, it got to her. Just get it out of me, Katie. And Katie says, Julia, that is a dead body. We need to get rid of it right now. And she says, fuck, Jules, we will find another way. And Julia looks at her with an expression that I can only describe as deeply skeptical. Like, I imagine that it's going to have to take magic, but when you say that there are wards, like, the thing is in you. What she is trying to affect is the one that apparently has the power. I'm not totally, I mean, depending on how you see this going on, you know, like, so unless it is Reynard, I don't know. But there's something about, and I didn't see the line here, so I don't remember where I got it that Julia thought it was the baby doing this. But maybe I made that up. But yeah, I don't know that I believe wards would do the trick, because I think the call is coming from inside the house, is what I'm saying. All right, so that's that story, and I just want to, I want Julia as a character to not have to deal with this anymore. So I am really hopeful that that the writers don't decide to force her to give birth to this thing. Because if that's what happens here, it's really going to be a wrap for me. I swear to God, guys, like, after what happened to Julia at the end of last season and how angry I was and the way that was done, if they force her to give birth to her rapist's baby, I do not think that I am going to be able to handle that. I just don't. It's just so... There is no parallel storyline for men that I can point to that reaches the same levels of violation as this. Even men being raped in a storyline is extremely different, and there's not a pregnancy that can result from that. Trauma, sure, trauma like anybody who would be raped, but there's something about being forced to carry and give birth, and the changes that wreaks upon your body forever, that feels so permanent. There's potential for physical effects that will never go away. If you are raped and you are not physically harmed in the act, once you heal from the assault, the physical scarring, or whatever you want to call it, is gone, and you are left with the trauma. But you don't necessarily see it in the mirror, so to speak. But if you are forced to give birth and your body changes the way that it can from pregnancy permanently, things can be affected that you can never rectify. You have to live with a body that somebody else altered on. Like, it's just, there's something about that. And that's part of why I think abortion is so important, is that people don't understand. It's not just not wanting a child. It's not wanting to be pregnant. Pregnancy, everyone acts as if in the modern day there is no danger. Pregnancy is still wildly dangerous, especially if you are poor, especially if you are a woman of color. You are not treated the same way. So it's just difficult for me to get across how very specific something like this feels to me. In the chat, Michael Kioski says, I definitely also inferred the fetus was doing it. Hugabug says, I got the impression it was the baby too. In the book, she doesn't get pregnant, so this was a difference in the show. All right, show. Well, we'll see. Okay, so I'm going to back it up, and we're going to talk now about what's going on with Penny. And it's a really interesting thing that's going on, because it turns out that Penny got his hands back, but those hands can't do magic anymore. And it's really funny because, like, finally later on, the professor, what's his name? Kowalski. It's some fucking Russian name. When Penny says my hands are useless, he has to be like, except that, they can do everything hands can do, which is extremely important, which I was like, thank you. Because Penny's just acting like Mayakovsky. Thank you, Hugabug. Because really, it was frustrating me that he got his hands back. And don't get me wrong, I understand the difference. Like, it's like if I got my hands back and I could do everything but cook, which is really important to me, or but type, it's something that's deeply important to who he is, and considering the danger that all of them have been in recently, feels extremely crucial, and is also the key to him being able to travel with people, which he only just learned how to do. So I understand Penny's frustration, but I do also feel like he is discounting the importance of just having regular old hands a little too easily, and he needs to be reminded. And he's in the dean's office in this opening scene, and he's talking to Dean Fogg about the fact that Fogg's hands, he is able to work on his magic and not exactly get it back, because to a degree the magic going out of the world due to the wellspring is beyond his control, but he is able to practice getting magic back with what is available. But that is because his hands are his own hands, and what Penny has were given to him by some other creature. And Fogg says something like, "There's nothing we can do." And Penny gets up and starts to walk away. And then he says, "There's nothing we can do here. There are other options." And I'm like, dude, do you need to do this? Why are you like, I get so annoyed. People who speak in this way, where they're like, I'm going to do a little bit of like wordplay and trickery to mislead you, and then be like, haha, you misunderstood. No, they understood what you chose to say, and you just chose to dick around. And he says, I can send you to somebody who may know more. And he tells him that he can send him up to Mayakovsky. And Penny immediately is like, that fucking guy's an asshole and a perv and a drunk. No. And Fogg is like, well, then I can send you to where I sent Quentyn. And he says, where's Quentyn? And we cut to, I love this, guys. So we cut to a computer screen. Everything about this is the perfect intro to the world that he now occupies, he being Quentyn. It's a pie chart. It's in black and white. It's not even in color. The desktop is just this like navy blue. There's a Post-it stuck to the screen that says something on Friday meeting, I think. And then it says in parentheses, don't go. And he's just scrolling wildly with his mouse. The whole office is this uniform shade of gray. And he's sending back an email in all caps and staring around with an obvious feeling of just like, what the fuck am I doing? Before he decides that he's just going to go get a cup of coffee. And this is apparently, I have not worked in an office like this. The closest I've gotten to working in an office was being a bank teller in a small bank where there was a lot of downtime. And when I say downtime, I just mean like you could literally play a board game. But it wasn't this sort of everybody is doing their work on their own time, because you're still dependent on customers coming in and having to perform the way that you do when you are in customer service. So it was a little different, but this moment of just going to get coffee for something to do, I understand this to be a thing, right? Like those of you who work in offices probably know what I'm talking about, that you just like need to stretch your legs. You need to do something, and you can't just like eat all day. I mean, you can, I would, but it's not a great idea. So what is the thing you do? You grab a stimulant. You grab something that has less calories in it, allegedly, depending. You grab a coffee. And so he goes to this break room for the coffee. And this dude is telling this story. I left my wallet in my car. Talk about bad timing. Yeah. Hey, does Donut House, does that taste like donuts? I just use that thing for soup. And he looks around and says, what the fuck? I love this scene, you guys. I love it. Love it. Like, there's so much about it that I love. I love this boring guy telling the story that, like, it's not even just that the story is boring. It's that the way he's telling it sucks. And that the most interesting thing the guy says, which is, I just use that thing for soup, is something that he just drops before walking away. Like, you finally said something that Quentyn's like wanting to know more about, but this is the thing that you're just like, whatever, I just leave. Now, I assume that what he means is I use it to heat up water and dump it directly into a cup of soup thing and cup of noodle. And that's what he means. But I definitely understand Quentyn just reacting the way that he does, because it sounds like, oh yeah, there's soup pods on the other side of that rack. You just stick one of those in there and you're all set, you know? I just love that this whole, and Quentyn's reaction and the whole thing. Also, I should mention, and I don't think I've said this before, that I am now watching the show on Netflix because I bought the first season on Amazon Prime, not realizing it was on Netflix. I thought that I searched Netflix for it, and for whatever reason I didn't find it, but it's there. So this second season that I'm watching on Netflix, all of the swearing is unfucked with. I won't even say bleeped, because in the Amazon version, it's not bleeped. It's just sort of distorted. So you can tell that they said fuck. You can read their lips, and you can hear the like in the background, but it's overlaid by this distortion to make the word less distinguishable in the dialogue. So when he says what the fuck here, it's really just wonderful. And so he's trying to open this jam jar to make his toast, and he can't quite get it open. And so he does a little bit of wiggling to get it to open. And by wiggling, I mean spell casting. And who should walk in but the girl that talked to Alice about her brother, the girl who had an affair with a mysterious professor whose name we don't know, and wound up fucking up her face to make herself more attractive. It's a really nice little like tie-in. I think, I don't know if this is something from the books, if this is like a thing that, I wonder about the conservation of character sometimes, and how much of it is simply for that because we want to have the same people. But I just really like the idea that she was placed in this job after giving up magic the way that she did. That this is a program in place for if things turn out to be too much for people. That this has happened before, and that's, this is just something that they occasionally have to deal with. And I love her showing up, and she emails him and says, I saw, me too, want to grab lunch. And he gets this look on his face because, like, understandably, he kind of doesn't really want to talk about magic anymore. Like, this is the whole point of what he's done by coming here, is attempting to leave this behind and change his life. And it's clearly, like, uncomfortable to realize that even here, he can't necessarily get away from it. And, like, to a point, he maybe should have expected there to be another magician in the place that he was specifically placed by Dean Fogg. Like, I feel like a part of him should wonder if there are others. But I think he was just hoping, even if there were, that the whole point of us being here is that we're trying to avoid, like, engaging with this world anymore. And so we will keep to ourselves and never really reveal ourselves to one another. And I like the idea that Quentyn is still willing to use this magic to open this jam jar. This is not a big deal. It's a little spell to just help with opening a jam jar. But it does point to a certain flexibility in his decision to stop using magic. It's not really a decision to stop using magic. It's a decision to stop being part of the magical community. And that's different. So that's really, I think, the major reason why he gets the expression on his face that he does. And when they meet up, it's a pretty great scene, actually, because the way that they relate to one another and the way that they both sort of react to the discussion of how magic has affected their lives, there's something so real about that. Even though magic is not a relatable topic, you know this moment, right? When you're talking to somebody and they have gone through something that you've gone through, or have a similar focus on a subject that you have, and they have the same takeaway that you do. So, for example, if I was talking to somebody about Harry Potter and they were like, and Snape is such trash, and I would have this sort of yeah, oh my God, thank you. Not that it's so rare that people think that, but you know what I'm saying? It's just one of those, those topics that not everybody agrees on. A lot of people you meet might not, or might not have the critical thinking to even have given it much thought or whatever. And you get to realize that you're in the presence of somebody who thinks the same way that you do. So when he asks her, do you ever cast anymore? She says, God, no. But later on, it seems as if that's not true, because she's got a couple of things really ready and up her sleeve. So when she says, God, no, I assume that is a larger sense. Maybe she does little things here and there, but probably tries to avoid it more even than Quentyn does. And she says, you don't give up magic because everything's peachy. And then she says, do you want to tell me? Clearly meaning, do you want to explain why you gave up, why you're here? And he gets kind of weird, and she's like, never mind. Don't worry about telling me. You don't need to talk about it right now. And she says, it's ridiculous that we're teaching this shit to kids. And that starts Quentyn off. And he's like, yeah, everything we fix, it's just 5 shitty things spring up in its place, because each spell is just another complication, and that we cast another spell to fix, repeat until there's no spell left, and you're just left with a big fucking problem, is what she says. And it's a moment of complete connection, right? So she takes a sip of her wine and she spills it on her top. And he instinctively pulls the stain out of her shirt and with magic, and then stops and realizes what he just did. And he's like, I am really sorry. And she gets up and leaves and is clearly irritated by this and doesn't want to talk to him. A good couple of scenes go by with her rebuffing his attempts to apologize and being very angry at him and being like, we had literally just talked about how terrible magic is, and then you just did it immediately after we finished the sentence. And she tells him, essentially, go find another company to work for. I don't even want to be around you, which is really fucking harsh, honestly. And finally, she kind of gets over it. It's understandable that she reacts the way she does here, but she gets drunk after hours and comes in and is just like, dude, all right, forget it. I'm sorry I made you feel so bad. Why don't we just hang out? And they wind up going, and I think there's just smoking weed and blowing all of these different smoke spells that look pretty wild, and having a good time. And then they wind up drunkenly back at her apartment, and she draws him into the shower to do a spell that only works while you're wet. And she says the spell, and it was one of those things that I don't know Latin. I think it was Latin. But I could pick up enough to be like, she just said something about the one for me. What the fuck? This is not just some silly spell. This feels like it's about love. What is she doing? And sure enough, when he steps out of the fucking shower, he looks like Mayakovsky. It turns out that that is the professor that she was having an affair with and is in love with. And it's really a pretty fucked up scene because they're each admitting to the other that they don't want to be with each other. They want to be with somebody else and they can't. So we're just going to pretend we are and try and be happy with this fantasy for a little while. Which is like simultaneously something that I could see being therapeutic, but also really fucking dangerous. You know, this is something that I think could send you spiraling in the wrong direction. And it feels like for her, it does. It feels like it makes her spiral a little bit. This is not something that helps her let go. It is something she is using to hold on. And it's so funny too, because it's Mayakovsky, but he has Quentyn's voice still. And they do it pretty well in this scene, because a lot of times when this sort of thing is done this way, the dubbing is really like clear and annoying and just doesn't quite work. And they managed to make it really seem like this is his voice in this room. Now that doesn't make sense to me in certain cases. Like here, it's just an illusion, right? But for something like Polyjuice Potion in the movie, I think they all still have their own voices when they transfer over, unless they don't. It's a very inconsistent thing in like the Harry Potter movies. And if you are literally transforming your body, your vocal cords and your nasal passages and everything would also change. So your voice would just change. It would. But I understand here that he has not actually really changed. I don't think. I think it's just an illusion, but it's hard to know. And he has to stay wet in order for this to work, which is another, it's sort of funny because like, after a moment, sir, that will not be difficult. Lol. And she asks him to try a Russian accent, and he sort of like gets this look on his face. But we cut then to them laying on the couch, and Quentyn is back to being himself. And he is really startled at the fact that she didn't want to have sex with him as Mayakovsky. She just wanted to cuddle him on the couch and lay on his chest. And she says, "This is what I miss the most." And I'm just like, that's heartbreaking, because it really takes it to a different place, you know, and makes it clear just how much she is still in love with that guy. You know, it's different than, it's not even an obsession the way that you would think of it. She just hasn't let go, and it's been a minute. It's been a couple of years, you know. I'm not somebody who hangs on for that long. I have gone through some pretty wretched heartbreak for sure, but, and as painful as it was, I'm lucky it ended as quickly as it did. But going on for years, I know this isn't uncommon. People like have a hard time moving on, and I just can't imagine this. Like, that's excruciating. So of course she returns the favor and turns into Alice. And she had asked at one point, like, how is Alice? And he's just like, yeah, she's dead. And doesn't get into, of course, the details of everything that happened. But she is very startled to find this out, because she had just been talking to the girl a few months ago, you know. And I had said in the previous episode that I appreciated that Alice seemed to really be dead, but that I thought we might still see her again. Now I'm not even sure she's really dead, because of the way this episode ends. We'll see. So I'm sort of pulling back on my congratulations that I was handing out there, because it seems like maybe they don't actually have it in them to just let it be. It remains to be seen. It could just be like a ghost that he saw, or, you know, something that's like here to torment him and take on her shape, but isn't actually her. Whatever. But for the time being, it may be that he like finds a way to like bring her back from wherever she went. Cause it seems like her body died. but she was a Niffin when she died. So I don't know if she's going to be like, her spirit will still continue to exist somewhere else and he's going to try and bring that back or what. But we'll talk about all that later. So when she gets out of the shower, I mean, she looks precisely like Alice, and you can see him just be kind of freaked out. And he has sex with her and wakes up in the morning and is just extremely like uncomfortable with everything. And it's pretty clear that, oh, what is her name? I keep wanting to call her Angela because she looks just like a boss that I used to have named Angela, who was super cool. But she is wanting to do this again. And he, of course, is like just kind of feeling emotionally raw and wanting to be by himself and mourn because he's just, this was a fucking weirdo thing that they just did, you know? And he tries to say yesterday was cheat day, but you can't cheat every single day. And she says, I won't tell. Clearly, just like this love that she has for Mayakovsky is still hanging on. And he just says, no, I don't want to. And she says, so what? You're done with me? I was helping you. And he says, that's not what I said. And I'm like, yeah, no, it's not. He's wanting to leave right now because things are weird. And you should understand that. It's not like he's just like, I just never want to see you again. It's just, that is a huge emotional moment. And you've got to know how much that affects somebody. Like, you are heartbroken and the guy is like, you know, somewhere else on the planet. But it's not like you are guaranteed to literally never see him again. He lost someone. She died in front of him, as far as he knows. Different situation. So, and yeah, he says, I feel worse than before. And she says something like, apologies for my terrible life. And he says, I just don't want to use magic like that. And he's trying to be as straightforward as he can. And he's not shaming her. You know, he's not trying to be like, I can't believe that you would do that. I can't believe you made me do that. There's nothing like that. He's trying to process his own shit. And she's demanding of him that he, like, take on hers as well. And he hasn't even finished with himself. And it's clear that she's not trying to process her own. She is just like hanging on in this sort of stasis. Emily, thank you guys. So yeah, she's left laying there in bed and it's obvious that she feels a real way about this. I have no idea what to expect after this, you know, we'll see. So, okay, I am running out of time. I'm going to talk about Penny. He winds up going to Mayakovsky and being given a series of more and more annoying tasks. There's like this huge room full of ropes that are like knotted that he has to untie. There's a table that he has to reduce to like basically wood shavings. And it turns out all of these objects are magical and that he is, by untying the knots or undoing carving apart the tables, he is like releasing the magical energy in those objects into essentially a storage container, a battery for Mayakovsky, because he is aware magic is sort of like starting to fade away. And he's just preparing himself and trying to store some in a place that he can access it and still have some, which is actually pretty smart. That's some pretty good foresight he's got. And we have another moment of somebody like talking about giving up magic. And he's saying to Penny, because Penny's so mad about having lost his ability to cast, he's like, look, dude, I wound up fucking up real bad and wound up being stuck here and losing most of my life, you have a chance to like go on and live a proper life and enjoy yourself. And there's a real bad thing coming down the pipe. You're probably getting out at a good time. He says a bad surprise. And he says energy current should be constant. And he holds up this like paper that monitors apparently like magical energies. And it's this like ticker tape that comes out of some machine. And he says the current is sputtering because of the wellspring and fillery, and it might disappear. And if that's the case, if magic goes, it will be very bad time to be magician. So consider the advantage of getting out now. And Penny is just basically like, I mean, I guess, but for right now, I'm staying here. Then you're just a fancy scarf wrapped around an idiot. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. To which Penny is like, well, then let's both go. And he's like, hi, idiot. Of course I can't go. Do you think I would live here for fun? Are you kidding me? I am here because I fucked the wrong student and I wound up being punished by being exiled here. And you know what? I'm not mad about it. Like, she wasn't a minor. So at least we can say that he was fucking people of age. But it's a really gross power imbalance that I feel like people try and pretend isn't there. And of course it is. So I'm not really like feeling too sorry for him in as much as he's being punished for what he did. So much as I'm not sure that isolating this man from the rest of all of humanity is totally the right call for as long as it's apparently been going on. But I don't know what the sentence is. He might be out in like, you know, another 5 years. Who knows? So the whole storage of energy thing is a really interesting idea. And I'm wondering how many other people are engaging in something like this as like a backup, you know? So let's go ahead and talk about Fillery and what's going on. There's a couple things. First of all, Fen is also pregnant. So we've got two parallel pregnancies happening. Her pregnancy is better news. It's kind of amazing because she's like, it's just hard for me to get used to the idea that, that Elliot is like trying to do the family thing, you know? And I think it's hard for him to get used to as well. He's just like such a, it sort of reminds me of in, Sex and the City, how great and also strange it is that what's her face is the first one that gets pregnant, Miranda. You know, she's like the least maternal, the most no nonsense, works crazy hours, very aggressive, and just not really somebody that has ever expressed interest in children. And she winds up having a baby and being the first one out of all of them to really start a family. And it's constantly strange. You know, she wasn't necessarily ready, but it happened and she decided to carry through with it. And Elliot is in the middle of like trying to celebrate the pregnancy of his wife. And there's this moment that's really weird. So it turns out, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, that this Foo Fighter, I will never not find that amazing. This Foo Fighter that comes in and attempts to assassinate Elliot is actually somebody that she was previously involved with. And what kills me is the fact that she is watching this dude whom she knows to be a member of this organization that she was part of. So she has to know that he's going to attempt to kill Elliot, because that was the whole thing. Like, that apparently was part of the deal of her agreeing to this marriage, was to get somebody on the inside to assist with the takedown of any earthlings that are trying to rule Fillory. But she doesn't say anything, and rewatching the scene, her eyes don't like really betray the fact that she knows him. And I can't tell if it's just that she knows she can't say anything because she is not supposed to be aware of who this guy is, or what. But it's a weird moment of just like, what's the word I want? It makes me wonder whether she... It makes me wonder a little bit on whether the writers knew, or she knew, that she was supposed to know this guy when she filmed that scene. You know what I'm saying? Because sometimes things are filmed out of order and things get changed or whatever. So I love the fact, too, that he finds out that she's pregnant because there's a bunny that just keeps saying pregnant. I find that just amazing. That it's like the lying cat from Saga. For those of you, I covered the first like couple of books of Saga, or not books, but like I think 3 issues per episode, so 6 issues. So I think that's 1 trade, if I'm not mistaken, for the Spoil Me podcast. But then they were not commissioned again, so it's been taken off the list, unfortunately. But yeah, this dude attempts to kill Elliot, and it turns out later on that she knows him, that they have gotten to know one another. And Elliot is really feeling like a way about having to execute this guy. And Margot is 100% about it. But she's a pretty brutal queen. Like, she is ready to just shed blood at the drop of a hat. And he isn't comfortable with it. He feels like that's creating a world that he doesn't want his child to be raised in. And it's a kind of a testament to Elliot's foresight that he thinks through the message that all of this will send, and is aware that not executing somebody who made an attempt on his life might be a bad call. Like, he's not doing this with a blindness to the fact that there's going to be consequences to this. And Margot, when he announces to everybody, surprising even her because he has not talked it over with her, that he's not planning on executing this dude, she tries to say that she's High Queen, and one of their court has to step in and be like, so... I hate to do this, but like, yeah, you're High Queen, but the king has the final say, and you don't really get to, like, you don't get to go against him. To which she says, so this is what the patriarchy smells like. It's not the freshest. Oh, I love her so much. And she says, you are a king, act like it. And he says, I'm not just a king. I'm going to be a father. And I just don't want to run this land this way. We can't just kill problems away. And he's not wrong. Just killing people leads to people who want revenge. It's a cycle. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there are times for violence. I think there are times where execution is necessary and the right thing to do. But acting like that exists in a vacuum is silly. And he says we have to hear the problems and address them accordingly. And she says, you want to rule a kingdom, guess what? People are going to die no matter what. Just try to make sure it isn't you, okay? And I like that because Margot isn't just being this way because it's made clear she's doing this out of concern for Elliot. Like, somebody tried to strangle him to death. She's not going to act like that's not important and something that gets to her. And then we have the confrontation between Fen and this guy whose name I don't remember, where he reveals that she used to also be a Foo Fighter. And I can't, guys. It's so good. And she tells him, like, first of all, I know that was the plan, but I kind of like Elliot. I think he's doing his best and actually cares about people. And also, I am pregnant. And he tries to be like, get us the information that we need on behalf of the child. Baylor, that's his name. And when he says, he replies with like, help us, or I'm going to go to the king and tell him how well I know his wife. And I guess, because he had thought that he was like sleeping with a virgin, but I guess she was not. Because the way that he says that to me means that they had sex at some point. And she tries to be like, no, whatever. I'll tell him myself about who I am and everything. And he's like, you know what? Go ahead and try. But we've all heard that he's pretty emotional and takes things very personally and is easily wounded. I don't think that you're going to go ahead and tell him at all. And she says, if you try and hurt him again, I will kill you myself. And that is the end of that scene. And I think I've covered everything. Oh, and just in the nick of time, too. But I think she should tell. I mean, Elliot might be emotional, and he might take things personally. That's all true. But also, I feel like it's great that she has inside information on who these people are, what they want, how they work. I mean, if he's trying to work with them and give and have a compromise of some kind, there is nobody better to talk to. So I'm hoping that she decides to trust him and go ahead and tell him. But we'll see. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you guys so much for coming into the chat, helping me with names again. And thank you again to Nicole for commissioning this episode. And I will see you again soon. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.